That's getting something. I don't think folks are doing it, the people really just come off. Yeah.
Same thing. Summertime. That's
And some of them, oh no, and some of these people that screw up people, they know the system, or you go. They know how to do, they know how to play the system.
It is that wonderful time of the week. Good morning, everyone. Glad to see everyone with us this morning. I heard everyone say, hey. It's a good morning. It's a good morning. We do have some who are sick. Brother Jim messaged me this morning. He'll try to be here this week. He had to go to urgent care this morning, and we have a couple things taken care of. He's at home resting. So if we can be praying for him, I know there's also others in the community who are sick, but we do need to keep them in our prayers, but especially Brother Jim this morning. We'll go ahead, if you want to open your Bibles to Psalm 46, we'll begin there in just a moment. Psalm 46. And we'll be in lesson 8 in the workbook. We'll kind of hit some of the things that they talk about. I think it's really just a good psalm all in all. But this might actually sound a lot like last week's lesson, because a lot of these psalms deal with prayer. So we'll be talking about some things that we talked about a week ago, and then we'll also come back to this idea here in about 2 weeks when we talk about prayer here. But to prepare our mind and get everything, our hearts ready for God, Love, can you lead us in prayer?
thank you, Father, that we have prayer. Love you, family everywhere, being able to worship and live. Pray, Father, that we our lives today are so successful, to grow in faith back in our lives and our mature in service. We always strive to serve together. Thank you, Father, Bible class, and preachers, and pray, Father, that you know that is not here. You know special, Father, Lord, we help us who also, Father, pray for those who pray for God. Morning, God, we hear places in our area that we work. We pray, Father, be with us today.
Okay, if we talk about prayer, normally a lot of people think of distressful times, maybe burdens or trials, and rightfully so. We talked about last week in light of what is prayer. If you were to tell someone what prayer is, the answers that we got were, across the board. They were all right. Prayer is a means of communicating with God. Prayer is a way in which we open our heart to God, in which we also look into God's Word, and God reflects His heart or shows His heart towards us. Sometimes prayer can be prayers of thanksgiving. If you look at 1 Timothy chapter 2, 1 through 4, you'll find 4 different types of prayers. Prayer, supplication, intercession, and giving of thanks. All 4 of those are necessary for us to have the proper attitude and mindset of where we need to be when we pray to God. And what we find in Psalm 46 is going to be kind of a prayer of intercession of sorts. This is an individual who turns to God in times of dark times in his life, and also it gives us some illustrations, I guess, of how we could also illustrate to those who are just learning how to pray, what does prayer truly reflect? So in Psalm 46, notice in the beginning, he's going to start with this idea that God is our refuge. If you look in the last verse, the very last phrase, it's the exact same thing. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Now, because God is our refuge, let's read the text first and then jump back through it and see if we can see God through the lens of the psalmist himself. Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. Selah. There is a river whose stream makes glad the city of God, the most holy place, or the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her, just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Selah. Come, behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Now, first let's look at this through the psalmist's perspective. Then we'll look at this from the Almighty's perspective. And then we'll look at the adversaries of God's people. So we'll look at the affection inward, the affection from upward, and the afflictions, if you want to call it that, from around us. So when I look at the psalmist's perspective of who exactly God is, notice how he has found a term to describe God. And see if maybe these are terms that you would use when you talk about God towards others. Why do you love God? You see God in this imagery. Notice verse 1, refuge, strength. If we talk about refuge or refugees, what does that imply is being provided for them, or maybe what's happening to them? Let's start with what's being provided. If you're a refugee, what does that imply has happened to you? Seeking something better. Could be one leaving where they were living and now they're going somewhere else. Could be that. Need of rescue. Maybe a natural disaster. That's happened a lot recently. But maybe they lost everything and now they're needing someone to help provide for them or at least give them some essential needs. What else could a refugee do?
Somebody that didn't really know. They didn't really have a understanding about life.
So it could be like a self-inflicted and/or like a
seeking.
preferred lifestyle, kind of like a nomadic lifestyle. There's multiple ways of looking at that. Maybe my refuge could be because I've caused this to myself. My choices or the way that I choose to live my life makes it to where I'm having to go from place to place and I don't really have stability. So the idea in light of a refugee, at least the way that the psalmist is presenting it, we're looking at this idea attached with strength. This is someone who has either lost something or someone who finds themselves in a foreign location. They need rescuing. They need some kind of provision. And not just that, they need encouragement. Think of it this way. If you've ever moved, isn't that the most wonderful process to go through? That would be a lie. That would be a lie. Unless you have a moving business, then by all means, take that with a grain of salt. We don't enjoy moving. Do you enjoy change? Like constant change? No, we don't. Now maybe if you're spending money, but that's not what we're talking about. If we don't enjoy change, what I find is an individual who finds themselves in an unstable place in life. And they're needing someone to comfort them through this process. This doesn't feel good. And it's not really something that I'm desiring to go through. But I know that I have God as I go through this. Notice when he says at the second half of verse 1, a very present help in trouble. If you find yourself lying on the floor and you do not have a life alert, who are you going to call? You want to call God. Who do people normally call? They call the ground, or maybe they feel something's wrong with their heart. Who do they normally go to first?
Could be 911.
I call 911 if something happens on my way to my friend. We would call someone close by. In fact, we would even go out of our way, regardless of what else is going on at that moment. We'll go directly to them. And nothing's going to stop us because this is urgent. And we've got to get this fixed. And if it doesn't get fixed, it might actually affect me. Notice the psalmist not only says, I don't have what I need, but also I can find encouragement from God. And notice the frequency of this in verse 1, anytime. Very present. Not just present, very present. Have you ever met someone who's a little bit overwhelming? Whenever you get to meet them and they're asking so many questions that you feel like, please stop asking questions. This is getting uncomfortable. Well, they just want to get to know you. Maybe they are that way. You just want to cut off the conversation. But with God, if He's trying to alert or tell His people, you may not see me, but I'm everywhere. Now, what's amazing is the backdrop of what this idea is presented against. Notice in verse 2 and 3. God will be there for me when I need Him in prayer. When? Notice this imagery, verse 2. Though the earth is removed, let's say, poof, it's gone. Okay, though the mountains be carried in the midst of the sea. Well, there goes all of Base Mountain and all the rest of the scenery here in East Tennessee, all gone. Though the waters roar and be troubled, greatest tsunami I've ever seen, it's going to take over all of America. And the mountains shake with its swelling. What the psalmist is saying is, it doesn't matter if it's the end of the world. It doesn't matter if Pompeii is about to occur, Mount Vesuvius is about to erupt. It doesn't even matter if the greatest flood known to mankind is about to happen, and or if your life just seems unstable. God will take the time to listen to you. And what's interesting is the imagery of this ending of the earth pictured right here. When you're going through troubles, and it can possibly affect your life for the long term, doesn't it feel like your world is about to end? Because that's all you can focus on. And what's amazing is God, in light of His supreme power and His divinity and His care, let's not forget that, in all the concerns of everyone else, who their world too may be ending, it tells me that God is instantly, readily available if I simply call on Him. So if I were to ask you, well, how do you describe God? Do you describe Him as one who can cause all earth-ending events to focus on my earth-ending circumstances? Do you call Him your refuge? Do you call Him your strength? Now, normally we don't use that kind of terminology. We would just say He is our comforter. He is one who gives us peace. But I like the word refuge because it implies that I am dependent and I have nowhere else that I can go. Notice the terminology and use that terminology because of the image that's presented with that. So when I look at how the psalmist presents God in verse 1 through 3, earth-ending circumstances mean nothing to the all-creating earth. Because He loves me, He'll tend to me when it seems like my world is turning upside down. But the psalmist also presents another picture of God. And this one I found interesting in how it connects to the rest of the Scripture. I'll try not to make this too technical. In verse 4 through 7, he ends this same idea, verse 7, the Lord of hosts is with us. Keep that word host in mind. The God of Jacob is our refuge. That same phrase repeats in verse 11. We'll talk about that here in just a second. But notice in verse 4 through 6, there is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God. Now, in one sense, we could look at this in historically. The city of God would be what city? Well, think historically first. That is true in the ultimate sense. Jerusalem. in I think it's 2 Kings chapter 20, there is a certain tunnel that you can go through today if you decide to go toward the Holy Lands. You can go through what's called Hezekiah's tunnel. There was a water problem back in Jerusalem. Really, there was oppression against Jerusalem, and Hezekiah and his men were trying to find a way out. So they dug out what's called Hezekiah's tunnel. You can go through that today under the city of Jerusalem. But notice this, there is a river whose stream shall make glad the city of God. And it doesn't give a river name, it gives a location. Notice river is associated with what we find in the second half of verse 4, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. Now that's interesting. It doesn't say temple, it says tabernacle. Why does that seem weird? What existed in the days of Hezekiah? Tabernacle or something else? Yes. Huh? Yeah, the temple. The temple. Must have been like me with this light action. But yeah, the temple. The temple was like the grandioso version of what we find the tabernacle to be. And what the psalmist is bringing us back to is a tabernacle. Now, what is the difference between, I know there's a lot of differences, but what is the main difference between the temple in Jerusalem and the tabernacle? They took it. It was a U-Haul. It was a worship U-Haul, so to speak. It was portable. If God is our refuge and strength, and you're in the time of earth-shattering, world-ending circumstance or crisis in your life, last thing you want is to be shaken again when you're already feeling unstable. I find it of interest that the psalmist is using terminology from a time when people were out in the wilderness and they were continually moving. That's not what you want when you're in a time of crisis in your life. You want that kind of stability and just stay in one placeness, so to speak. But don't miss what the psalmist is saying. What if it could be the place? What if it could be the case that in order for God to help me through the problem that I'm going through, the psalmist would say, would have to be that even when I find myself far away from where I'm used to, I can still find a holy place for God right where I am. The idea isn't to worship wherever you want to. That's not what this text is about. What it is saying is that there is a set location where the city of God can be made glad, verse 4. That the comforts found from God through prayer can be found anywhere. Even if you're uncertain. Even if you're on shaky ground. In fact, notice again the location name, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. The Most High is a unique term. It's really translated Lord in a lot of cases, but I want to show you one in particular back in Genesis 14. Genesis 14. Genesis 14, 18 through 20. Now, what is amazing about Genesis 14, I wish someone would make a movie over this chapter because it's the 5 kings versus the 4 kings, and it screams Lord of the Rings. The way that it's written, I think Tolkien took a lot of inspiration from this text. But at the end of the whole circumstance, after this battle of 9 different kingdoms, Abraham finds out that Lot is taken. He goes and he actually destroys Chedorlaomer, or however you say his name earlier in the text, and the other kings that have joined with him in the co-region. And after he delivers those nations and he rescues Lot, we find this phrasing from a priest of Salem, early Jerusalem. He would say in verse 18, Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God, Most High. Interesting phrasing. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hands. I believe the psalmist is coming back to this phrasing because I do not find that same, they call them monikers in literature, I don't find that same title for God across the Old Testament unless I'm reading the Psalms. And it's as if what the psalmist is doing is he's saying, go back to where this statement was found, the Most High, quite literally, God most sovereign, or God sovereignest, the highest of highest authorities. And honestly, what it could be illustrating, if you think through, okay, instability, I find myself in times of trouble, the tabernacle of the Most High, that was a title given to God, even though God already had it. It was a title we were introduced to after a very, very great battle was fought. Put that idea into context. There is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God. Stable location, constant refreshing, and it makes God's people glad. But I'm not there in the city. I'm in the wilderness. I'm lost in my trials, and I need someone to comfort me. Well, I can even find a place where even God will say, you can find peace here, and it's called the holy place of the God Most High. I find myself not necessarily having sandy ground around me and not able to get my bearings of where I am in my problems, but it could also illustrate I'm in a war. I can still find victory when I find myself in a battle against life and the conflicts that are presented through life. So you think of the heartbreak. You think of the trials that are presented in your life by others. You think of the trials that you create yourself. The idea of instability of my own choices. But the psalmist is presenting, I'm in a war here. And while I'm away, notice how he describes again the holy place of the God Most High. Notice verse 5. It reassures us God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. That seems like a counterproductive statement. You're saying that God is located in a place that moves around based upon my needs, but now you're saying that God doesn't move around. Again, it's trying to illustrate the idea of reassurance. You ever heard the song, I shall not be moved? And I need to remember that in light of when I go to God in prayer. Even if I'm far away from where I want to be, this tells me I can always find God at the same place, which is important. I can't always get people that I'm trying to reach, and I call them on the phone, or if I go to their home, or if I think that they're working and they're actually not. Those are unpredictable things. I can get a pretty good possibility that they're there. This is not possibility. This is assurance. God will be there. If you need Him, He is there. Notice it'll say twice, God is in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. But notice when. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. What occurs before dawn? Darkness. Ever had a night that never ends? Ever had a problem that just seems like it keeps going on forever and ever and ever? And you're laying there on your pillow at night and you're saying, God, when will this stop? I need to know, even in life, that when the night seems darkest, God always delivers at the break of dawn. And that's the idea. Hold out till daybreak. God will give you rest. If I give in to the enemies around me, notice verse number 6. The nations raged and the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice and the earth melted. If I simply wait for God to do what God says He's going to do, I know victory is assured. So I know that comfort can be given to me when I most need it and wherever I find myself to be, no matter how unstable I find myself or how foreign of a location I find myself to be in. God is just one prayer away. I also find that God does answer those prayers. Maybe not as quick as I want it to be. There's some nights where I want them to end just like that. But they never do. They never do. The morning always comes. The morning always comes. Wait on God. And verse 6 tells me, God sees your enemies through the darkness. He'll make sure that you see them defeated by morning on. I need to remember that. Because not only does it give me assurance when I find myself in strange places, but also it gives me assurance of how quickly or when God will answer, and He will answer. But also notice verse 8 through 11, and then we'll refocus our attention through this. Come and behold the works of the Lord. So I know when he can be there, I know where he is, but I need to look at his wonders. What does he do in light of my prayers? How do my prayers actually shape the foundation of other people's lives to give them a life crisis towards God? Notice in verse 8, come and behold the works of the Lord, who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. Rephrase, it feels like the earth is on my shoulders. I'm carrying these burdens that just seem like I'm no greater than the destiny of Atlas. I'm holding the world up, and it feels like it's crushing down on me, and no one's delivering me from this oppression. Notice again, the works of God, verse 8. God makes desolations in the earth. First thing it mentions, verse number 9, wars. Does it seem like sometimes everyone's out to get you? Have you ever felt that way? Notice the phrasing from this. God is saying, even when there are armies against me, God makes them cease. God makes them stop. If there's someone who is causing irritation in my life, or someone who's trying to cause me to fall away from God or stop trusting in God, again, remember the works of the Lord. He did this in the life of David. He did this in the life of Solomon. He even would have done this in the life of Saul had Saul actually kept his promise to God. And how many times throughout the Old Testament we find time and time again that God's people turn to God, God delivers them, and then what do they do after? They fall away. And then when they come time for trouble, oh God, save us, and then he saves them, and then what happens after? They fall away. We keep seeing that same cycle. Does that reflect your life?
See that thought. You don't want to worship, or maybe don't even read your Bible or whatever, but time of trouble or trials, they're wanting people to pray for them, they want God to help them.
And it's of interest how that works, because people kind of think of learning of God like a school setting, so to speak. Worship has a place, but if all I do is try to learn about God when I go to worship, I'm cheating God every other time in my life. God needs to be the forefront of my focus when I'm in worship. He needs to be in my mind when I'm making decisions and actions and how I treat others, when I'm at work, when I'm enjoying the pleasures of my life. I need to keep God at the forefront of my mind. Am I using these things to His glory? If I find a way to attach God to all aspects of my life, then He becomes more than just a theological textbook. He becomes a living being who looks upon me and wants the best for me, and even works and fights for me if I put Him into my life. So the idea of that, a lot of problems are mainly found because people don't know how to talk to God. And they think if they just go back to old hat that they'll find Him. And there is a small amount of truth to that. But how can we expand that to make Him even more in our lives? That's really good. Really good.
And we'll live with someone. We used to go into jail. Those guys go there and they not perfect. They they're willing to listen. Well, just do what they don't have to pray. May or may not have done it. In a time of weakness. I think we all reach out to God in a time of weakness.
Yeah. And this is kind of a humbling way in light of the poetic license that's presented through the psalmist. In light of when I find myself weak, I don't turn to someone who I don't trust or I don't know upon first instinct. And the idea is I'm looking for someone to deliver me. And even though I'm a refuge, it doesn't say that God refuses me when I'm in need of help. Not in the idea of wanting to help me, but maybe the way that God can help me through my life, maybe He needs when I find calamities across my life, be still. You know, I said that in order to shift me to the be still. God says, look, all this is unstable around you, and you're just going crazy because of your anxieties. And rightfully so. Your heart is fluttering faster and faster. And it seems like you're stammering over your words, and you're starting to stutter, and you're sweating, and you're crying, and you can't focus because you're too emotionally distraught. And nothing wrong with showing emotion. But God just says, be still. And know that I am God. I'll be exalted among the nations, where there are wars, where there are enemies, where there are oppressions. When I find myself, verse 8, in a place of desolation, where it seems like God is far from this place, but God will be exalted in the earth. Though that is a statement of God saying, I will cast judgment on the earth, it's supposed to also be a reminder to me as His child. God has power over every aspect of where I can find oppression, depression, or some kind of affliction from others in my life, and even myself. If God has control over those things, then what can God do when I put Him as God in my life? Now, I want to look at one other thing, and then we'll open to some thoughts. Though it opens with verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. And then I go down to verse 7, the Lord of hosts, it means the commander of all things, not just people or angels, but also nature, is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Verse 11, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. I am reminded of a passage back in Genesis 27, I believe it is. Let's turn over there for a second. Well, this is where this begins, but it actually found in Genesis 28. Genesis 28. Now, if you were here last Wednesday or Sunday evening, if you heard the lesson from Sunday evening, we talked about the place where Laban and Jacob made a vow to one another. And we talked about what are different promises that you and I make to each other when we become Christians. Well, what we find in chapter 28, this is after Jacob flees from Esau because he found out that Esau's going to kill him. And he has a vision that we typically call the vision of Jacob's ladder. Really, it's the vision of God's ladder in Jacob's dream. But for some reason, we took out the middle part and let's call it Jacob's ladder. I want you to look, well, actually, before that, what do you think would have happened if you found yourself in Jacob's shoes? His mother and father are telling you go flee to a land far up north, probably a couple hundred miles. Well, it is definitely a couple hundred miles to get up north where his uncle and his cousins with him. They're telling you to leave everything. How much can you take because you're going on foot? As much as you can carry. Is it wise for you to take as much as you can carry? Comfortable. Okay. So that would be nothing at all. That's comfortable. Okay, so he is close to nothing. He's leaving the place that he was born, and his inheritance, his parents are basically telling him, you need to get far away from everyone you know, everywhere you've been, what you've grown accustomed to, and who you trust in. All of it's gone. And all you have is what's on your back. What kind of questions are going to be popping into your mind because your parents have told you to do such a thing? What am I going to do? Now, are you worried about mainly the next day, or are you worried about much further down the road? So I'm concerned what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen the next hour. I have no one. I could be raided, I could be robbed, I could be mugged, and I don't have anyone that I can confide in. Hence, we now have the vision. Notice after this vision, well, actually, let's read through this. Verse 13, Genesis 28. He saw the angels of God ascending and descending on this ladder, and behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Also your descendants shall be as the dust of the west and the east, to the north and the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done as I have spoken to you. So Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! There's none other, or this is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob arose early in the morning and took a stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the place had been the city of Uz previously. Now, notice this. This is very important. Why does the psalmist keep bringing up God of Jacob, who is my refuge? Notice what Jacob would say. If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I can come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. Don't we think in the most ultimate sense that if we were to make God our God, and we find ourselves wandering in a place of, how am I going to get back here? Everyone that I know is right here. Everyone that I've grown up with is right here. Everyone that I love. And God wants me to go far away. Do we not think, one, God sees those oppressions maybe going on in our heart? Or maybe you have questions as to what's going on in other people's lives, and you're not sure, I don't see the end of this. Do we trust God that regardless how things play out, if we were to trust and confide in God, can we have that same mindset that Jacob has right here, verse 20? If God says he'll be with me, and God says he'll take care of me, he'll make sure that I don't lack food, he'll make sure that I don't lack clothing, and he also promises that I will be back with my loved ones. Doesn't that, in the ultimate sense, sound like heaven? Even though I find myself on wayward ground, and I'm trying to be confident, or at least reassure others around me that everything's going to be okay, but even I'm having doubts, it seems. What if I were to trust in God and make God my refuge? Did God ultimately bring Jacob back? Yeah. It took over 20 years, but he brought him back. Do we not think that maybe there could be missed out time because of the way that we respond to our circumstances today? But what if we made God our refuge and our guiding light when we find ourselves wavering, and God will bring us right back where we desire? Now, in the ultimate sense, heaven being that location, I connect that idea to what the psalmist is saying. God has made a promise that he will not leave me or forsake me. Again, notice the last phrase of verse number 1, a very present help in time of need. That tells me that he will not only always keep his promises, but he'll always be nearby to answer my prayers when I need him. I need to remember that as I find myself going through life, going through worship, going through work, just thinking of life's problems. And if I were to give those to God, wouldn't that actually help me in the long run? Because that's less concerns I have on my mind. And it doesn't mean you're not thinking about them, but I'm reassured knowing I've given my problems to God. God said he'll resolve them out. I don't need to worry about the details per se. I just need to know about this certain thing. God loves me. He works for me. He fights for me. He comforts me. And he gives me a place to call home when I find myself feeling far from the place I long to be. That's what I find from Psalm 46, that God is my help in trouble. God is the individual who gives me a river when I find myself far away. And if I look at all the amazing things that God has created in light of his power against armies and against others who oppress me through my life, what if I make that a positive thing through my life simply because I trust? It's a really good song. It's a really, really good song. Any thoughts or ideas, questions? Not hard questions. Directly. what it takes sometimes, if not a lot of times, than we want to admit. It takes honest reflection. You know, maybe I'm actually the reason why God's not helping me because I've been asking, but I've done nothing to actually show Him that I love Him. So that's really good. Okay, so this goes into John 9. We know that, it's a hard question. John 9, we know that God fears not sinners. But then you've got a case like Acts chapter 8, where you have someone who was seeking after God, even though he wasn't a part of the covenant people yet. But he was seeking God. It is true that God can hear all things. However, God does not oblige himself to have to answer questions or prayers unless you're his child. And that's the idea that's presented in John 9. Those who could care less to find God, God does not oblige himself to that. That is just simply words. Because then in that case, you have a creator who can't listen to his created. And God sees all things and knows all things. So in the proper context, he does hear them. He doesn't acknowledge them and oblige himself to answer those things. And it could be, maybe in light of some of the things that they're asking, if you think of like Paul, who prayed and fasted for 3 days when he was blinded, it could be that maybe the way that God uses the answering of those prayers will ultimately lead up to one obeying the gospel. So that goes into providence, and that's all I know on that. But that's a good question. That's really good. Any other thoughts? Okay, we're done 4 minutes early. Enjoy your free time, because you might lose it if you work it out. So thanks for your time. We'll be back at the top of the hour.